Electricity or the proposed amendments in the Electricity Act 2003 in the year 2014-15. I'd like to invite our esteemed speakers to join us. Mr. Suhas Tulzapurkar, Mr. Maru. Dr. Deo is joining us shortly, and I'm given to understand that we may be joined by the Power Minister himself a little later. So we are keeping a slot for him. This is the second in the four-leg road show of the Electricity Act amendments. And I want to basically start off by telling you, to those of you who don't know, that IPPI was very much involved in the road shows before the Electricity Act was passed. And we were working with the Ministry of Power and the powers that be at that time. And we went all across the country, interacting with very many people, very many organizations, seeking their views, seeking their opinion. In fact, it was said in those days that this was one act which was passed after a lot of discussion and the maximum amount of debate across the country. The question we need to ask ourselves is, why are we now wanting to amend it? Or what has the act done for us or not done for us? And there are again schools of thought in this regard. Some feel the act was very enabling. It allowed trading to happen. It talked about open access. It decentralized, delicensed power generation, etc. And then there's another school of thought which said the act actually failed to deliver. And to deliver, we meant to fail to deliver to the consumer. Because ultimately, whichever way you do your mathematics, unless the consumer is in a position to pay you money, unless he's in a position to do something constructive with your electricity, you are sitting in a situation of a no-win, absolutely. And so today's discussions basically center around some of the proposed amendments that we are talking about in the Electricity Act 2014. Differing perceptions, differing thoughts will emerge, and I'm aware of it, and we are very conscious of it, because people view things differently. The generator views it differently. Transmission companies have their own issues. Distribution have their own problems. Consumers have their own issues. Maharashtra, for example, has a very high industrial tariff. So the burning issue today is that industry is saying either you decrease the tariff or we move out. Now whatever happens on the tariff is not important. What is important is a very strong signal coming from the paying section. As the former MD of MSEDCL used to say, that the paying section of my consumers contribute 65% of my total revenue. And the non-paying section, and it's about 10 to 15% of his consumers. And if they are going to move out of the state, as is being proposed, then you're definitely going to have some serious problems. So when we look at, before we start the day, we need to understand that you will hear all kinds of conflicting and, if I may say so, contrarian views on perhaps the same issue from different points of view. And I think it's very important for all of us to appreciate that and make a note of it and then see how we can move forward with that. The Electricity Act 2003 had some very interesting provisions which somehow never got implemented. And I'm going to sort of talk about them in my presentation. And I'm going to start off with the issues that we have. And these issues are actually, if you notice, are broader than just the Electricity Act 2003. For example, the mindset of people about public-private partnership perhaps needs to undergo a change, and I want to explain this to you. Today morning in the newspapers, there is an agitation again on the toll, the road, the concession for the tolls. Now, without getting into the nuts and bolts of what the agitation is about, the fact of the matter remains that private sector companies were invited under a PPP relationship to invest money in infrastructure, including tolls. And for some reason, a 20-year, 25-year contract has been short-circuited, and people are now talking about reducing the life of that contract and cancelling it if possible, or perhaps reneging on it in some cases. Now, why is this happening? So the mindset is that the private sector is taking the public for a ride. So if you notice the change in environment between 2003 and 2014 is, in a sense, the mindset of people is on this public good versus private profit. And so regulation seems to be creeping back into the sector. And this is coming in through the Act, this is coming in through conduct of governments, this is coming in through public opinion, etc., etc. And nobody in the private sector or any of them actually is in a position to defend their, shall we say, position and justify their position to the people at large for some strange reason, I don't know why. And perhaps Mr. Maru can throw some light on it as to why doesn't the private sector take a very strong view and perhaps mobilize public opinion to counter this kind of populistic sentiment, free power, free water, free this, free that. The point is, everybody knows there's nothing free. Someone has to pay somewhere along the line at some point in time. So why do we sway ourselves or get swayed by this sentiment is something which needs to be looked at. And this mindset needs to change. And I'll tell you why it is important. If you don't change this mindset, you're not going to get private investments. And if you're not going to get private investments in infrastructure sector, then what is will begin to happen is you see that it's not just the power sector, it is airports, it is roads, it is bridges, it is the railways. Everybody is looking for private sector investments and PPP partnership. Water. Now, if that is going to happen, private sector won't come in, then how do you battle the shortage of capital that is required? Where is the money going to come from? And it again goes back to square one, that if the government had the money, they wouldn't bother about the private sector coming in the first place. So there are huge deficits in the government. They don't have the money. And so the only way we can meet the aspirations of the billions of people who live in this country is to get a decent infrastructure, decent healthcare system, decent water system, decent electricity supply, and have decent quality of life. But someone has to put in the money to build that infrastructure. And please understand, we are growing at a phenomenal pace. Almost 100 million jobs need to be generated every year. Where are those jobs going to come from? Now the latest ruckus going on in Parliament, and rightly so, perhaps I have not gone into the details, is on the Land Acquisition Act. The changes that have been made by the government or proposed through an ordinance is being challenged very strongly within and outside Parliament. Now the question is, if land acquisition is going to be so difficult or next to impossible, then the question comes that how do you set up industry? How are you going to generate those jobs? What is going to happen to our youth? So this whole dilemma of development versus environment versus the socio-economic re-engineering, this is always going to be a challenge in a country like India. And we have to strike a balance. So the mindset is the first issue I thought I'd quickly talk about. Now there's a demand for transparency, there's a huge amount of judicial activism, and there's a changing perception, which is a major challenge, as I mentioned. Now on judicial activism, I just want to say one thing. The recent Colgate scam, as it was called, now there may have been companies which have misrepresented or have been wrongly allocated blocks. But I don't think all 214 or whatever the number of mines that were cancelled were acquired through wrong means. And so therefore, this sweeping kind of judgments which are being passed are causing a lot of damage to investor perception. And so therefore, the courts and the judiciary needs to be sensitized as to what is the economic impact of these decisions. Whether it's the 2G scam, whether it's the coal scam, God knows what will be the next scam. The word scam has become very this thing. So everybody says, yeah. Sab private sector to chor hai. They're all chores. And so therefore this whole mindset that the fellows who have got must have got it through unfair means. So if you have a bank account in Switzerland, even if it has got RBI clearance and you're doing a legitimate business, nobody is looking at the detail. You must be definitely prosecuted and whatever. Same thing happened with the 1962 Income Tax Act. You went back 60 years just to pick up revenue from one or two companies like Vodafone and others. It's absolutely counterproductive. Now, there is also the overlap between public and private sector in the sense that there are no rules of engagement. Our entire bureaucracy has been set up, structured on a design of the 1800s, which was required by the East India Company and then the British government. There is no place for private sector interaction with government. There are no rules for engagement. So if you have an honest officer who takes decisions without thinking twice, the fellow will say, paisa khaya. The fellow has taken money. Why? Because he's taking decisions. If you have an officer who doesn't take any decisions, okay, he's the most inefficient fellow, he never took a decision in his life, he's promoted and he'll become the top chap. See, he's a very honest fellow. Nobody talks about the fact he doesn't take any decisions and he's causing a loss to the country and the loss to the economy. But so what? There's no inquiry against him. That is very important. And this I want to take you into history, where you will find that the East India Company, this is my favorite story, made lots and lots of money by having Dutch financing through municipal bonds. And the East India Company, being a profit-making company, made tons of profit. And the French also set up a company for trading with India, the French company, but that was government-owned. So two things happened. And this is a classic example of how we are going wrong. And this is historically recorded, but very few people know about it. The French company, being government-owned, was not interested in the profit. The officer on duty wanted to know what is his next posting. Where will he go next? What will be his next promotion? So he would do those things which would get him the promotion, not generate profit. And the result was, within 100 years, that company had to be wound up as bankrupt. The French government-owned company had to be wound up. Whereas the East India Company and the Dutch companies thrived. Why? Because they were driven by profit. So they were willing to take risks. Now when you take a risk, you find that whenever you take a risk, there's a reward. But you can also be wrong when you take a risk. The risk can go horribly wrong. Here what happens is, you can go to a bank and borrow money, and the officer who has sanctioned it, after looking at everything, he has said in good faith, okay, this looks like a good project, I have sanctioned the money, good. After 5 years, they find out the project failed for some reason. That officer is responsible. He must have been a corrupt fellow. He is also responsible for sanctioning the money. Why did he give the money in the first place? Arey boss, he's a bank. He has to earn interest. He has to lend money to earn interest to pay off the people who got a fixed deposit. But no, that mindset is there. So therefore, you need to look at this whole thing of rules of engagement and how to insulate and protect the decision makers in bureaucracy, because people are not taking decisions. The present government is trying very hard to do a lot of good things. How much of it is getting translated onto ground reality, God alone knows. Because the simple fact that nobody wants to take a decision.
Public good versus private profit. Now here is a public good. You have a CAG now audit going on of the private distribution companies in Delhi. Is it the right thing or the wrong thing? I don't know. But the fact is that state is intruding into what is private sector. The state is coming into areas which were hitherto not in the domain of the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, because his job is to look at government finance. But now he's going to look into the private finance. Why? Because there's a public-private partnership. There's a 49% shareholding of a government entity and 51% of a private entity. But since it is a public good, it is now being audited. Fair enough, nothing wrong with that. But I have a question. Is that not casting aspersions or some kind of this thing on the regulatory system that we've got? Because it's a highly regulated industry. Electricity is not an open industry. So if it is regulated, and you already have statutory auditors, and on top of it you have regulatory commissions overseeing and overlooking and zealously looking at every rupee and paisa, now the CAG will comment on that, is it? So what is the strength and what is the erosion in the authority of a quasi-judicial body like the Regulatory Commission? Sanctity of contract, the least said the better. There is no such thing as sanctity of contract. There is no contract. In a country which used to swear by word, Raghu Kulreet Sada Chaliyai, Pran Jai Bachan Jai, written contracts don't have a value. We're always finding ways and means how to get around it. And then ultimately we end up paying a huge price. You look at the amount of arbitration the ONGCs of the world and the others are facing, and the kind of adverse orders they are getting. There is no honoring of contract. And the sovereign feels, why should we? What the sovereign is not realizing is every time he doesn't honor a contract, 100,000 investors are not going to invest because in anything to do with public good or infrastructure or government. Now, this is very important. A private company providing infrastructure also will come under public scrutiny because you're providing something for the public, like the CAG audit, like this, that, and the other. So what does it mean? It means I don't want to get into this business. I'm not investing in infrastructure. I don't have anything to do with government. Why? Because it's very uncertain. You can come up with some old crazy rules and create a problem for me. The governance system within the companies, corporate governance, is not good enough. And then there is the policy and regulatory uncertainty. Is the tariff going up? Is the tariff going down? Is the regulator going to pass an order like this, or the regulator is going to pass an order like that? A regulatory commission in Karnataka says something else, another one says something else. Open access is allowed, open access is not allowed. Open access is allowed, but the contract demand will be reduced. Open access is not allowed, no contract demand is reduced, nothing is allowed at all. Temporary charges are going to be put for overdrawals, no temporary charges are going to put overdrawals, but we just will not allow you. If you want, you migrate permanently out of the system and take it from anybody else. In one particular case, a distribution company said, hello, you want open access, take full open access. You want partial access, it's not in the law. So, I mean, where do you go? And then if you look at the little cartoon, the public sector is smiling away and the private sector is not very sure. Why this cartoon is important is that today, please understand, 95% of the power sector is still in government hands. So the public sector still dominates, whether it's NTPC or Power Grid or whatever. So basic issues that needed to be addressed was sanctity of contracts, fuel availability, fuel logistics, falling PLF levels, stranded capacities, transmission bottlenecks, lagging capacity, mounting financial losses of DISCOMs. Nobody's talking about DISCAM. This is very interesting. The Montek Singh formula gave, I think, 1,50,000 crores or some number in around 2000, 2001. In 2014 again, we have had the FRP, 13-14. I think 1 lakh crores or something has been disbursed, and I'm told the hole is getting bigger. Now, what is this hole that is getting bigger? Is it that they are buying long-term power and selling it on the exchange to manage cash flow, that somebody has suggested? I don't know. You can't buy 6 rupees power and sell it at 3 rupees and 2 rupees on the exchange because you get money in 2 days and you can pay salaries next month. There's something seriously wrong somewhere. So we need to figure it out. What's going on? Okay, we've been there before. Promoting enabling competition was one of the objectives of the 2003 Act. Have we promoted competition? You got to be kidding me. There's no competition. You don't fight with a hippopotamus if you're an ant. Okay, he just roll over you any day and you won't disappear from forever and become a fossil. And so you find open access could never really take off as it directly hates the survival of state-owned discoms. Electricity being a concurrent subject. So two things. Every time the politician asks the distribution company, have you got competition? He says, sir, next month's salary I won't be able to pay. You want, I'll do it. Or you get a check. Provisions of the amendments, separation of carriage and content in electricity, something interesting, has its own issues. I'm sure people will talk about it. Structure, functioning and accountability of regulatory commissions. Now they want the regulatory commissions to be accountable and want to change the structure. Renewed focus on open access and its implementation. Problem is open access at whose cost? Open access for whom? Open access at what cross-subsidy surcharge? The cross-subsidy surcharge was supposed to go down, it's going up. Identifying the need for decentralized distribution, generation, smarter grids and ancillary services. Tariffs to ensure recovery of the cost of electricity without revenue deficit. This is impossible. How can you have in a highly politically charged environment such a situation where you will be able to recover your costs? Your costs are huge. You're buying power at 2 rupees 80 paisa typically and you're selling it at 6 rupees, 5 rupees and still you're losing money. Focus on grid security through grid discipline, etc., etc. This is another phenomena. We have n-1, in fact in some situations we have n-2 and n-3. So if the line can carry 5,000 megawatts, it will carry 700 megawatts. Why? Because in case one line trips, then what will happen? Another line will trip and then this may have a cascading impact. So we have moved away from the thermal loading principles to the principle of surge impedance, which by the way doesn't happen in too many countries in the world, I'm told. Promotion of renewable energy. We're very excited about the sun. Solar energy. I have a very simple question. Solar energy is a damn good idea, but who's going to pay for it? The tariffs are coming down, but still they're pretty high. You can't pay 3 rupees and 2 rupees and 4 rupees to Mahagenco. How will you pay for solar energy? I'm not very clear. Regular revision in the electricity tariff. That's not happening. Some people had not filed the ARRs for 10 years, 12 years, 13 years. Okay, so no direction on revival of stranded capacity. This is the last slide I'm going to stop because this presentation goes on and I want the other speakers to come in. So there's no direction on revival of stranded capacity. There's the story about 8,000 megawatts of gas-based power plants, 20,000 megawatts of thermal-based power plants, stuck either for lack of coal, lack of transmission line, or lack of getting funding. No direction for clearing congestion of transmission lines. The grid is connected. We have an all-India grid. Maybe 100,000 megawatts connected to 40,000 megawatts in southern region through a 5,000 megawatt strand which runs and 700 to 1,000, 1,100, keeps changing. That's not grid connectivity. You still have transmission congestion. No plans for financing transmission projects. We don't have a plan, honestly. Incentivizing of hydro projects through HPO is missing. We don't want hydro projects anymore. I don't know why. I think we only want thermal projects and become like China, so we'll have acid rain all over the place. Allied infrastructure support in rail ports for movement of fuel. I don't know the latest number, but 15 million tons of coal is lying in the Coal India sites, accumulated, waiting for enough railway capacity. And a similar number of 5 to 7 million is lying on the ports. So now if you want to run your plant, you can't even import the damn coal because there's no movement of trains, rail system. You're not able to evacuate. As I mentioned, there's no clarity on rules of engagement. Installation of qualified regulatory and regulatory cadre. There's no cadre. We have a cadre for the IAS, we have a cadre for the police service, we have a cadre for the account service. Why can't we have a cadre for the regulatory service? I still don't understand. Over-focus on renewable energy. while the basic energy is lying stranded, um, the issues of infrastructure are there. We are focusing on renewable, which is great. And then, of course, no plan. Well, I think I've covered most of that. Okay, I'll just leave you with this last thought before I move on. Who will be the owner of the holding company? Separation of content and carriage. What happens to legacy contracts? How will the capitalization of the holdco takes place? Who will take charge of the ownership and financing of these holdcos? How will the holdcos compete with expensive legacy contracts versus cheaper short-term power? Very interesting phenomena. Today, electricity boards want to get rid of the long-term contracts. Okay, like for example, it's proposed in Delhi, they want to get rid of 4 particular contracts, one with NTPC, one with DVC and others, which are high cost power, and then they find they are able to be, revenue positive. So long-term contracts are expensive power, and short-term power is cheaper. And everyone kept telling us short-term power is only for, through the exchange, is only for a week, 10 days, 15, it will go up. It hasn't gone up in the last 1 year, 1.5 years. So the huge amount of capacity of stranded capacity is there, but people prefer to buy short-term power. So how will you compete? How will these holdcos compete? And who are you going to sign your long-term PPA with? Everyone is talking, and I'm sure Dr. Dev will react to this. You're supposed to sign a long-term PPA to get bank finance. The banks are worried now because every time they give 25-year, 30-year project money, they have got only 10-year money. And now they're trying to find ways to extend that. They have short-term finance, giving long-term financing. And so you're going to have these long-term PPAs. And obviously you need a long-term PPA so that your fixed charges are not too high. But the question is, once you break up this content and carriage, are you going to sign with a holdco, which doesn't have a capitalization base yet, and has only legacy contracts which are expensive power which nobody wants? So what is the financial capability of the holdco that will allow it to sign PPA contracts? Consumers with, a very interesting issue, consumers with load of 1 megawatt and above are deemed to be open access consumers. Because they're beyond the regulations, regulatory commissions can only determine the wheeling charge and others, but not the tariff of the open access consumers. Cross-subsidy surcharge to be applicable only for open access and not in the case of migration to other supply licenses. I have not understood this. What would this actually imply and to whom this CSS would be paid? Rationalization of tariff. They're going to set a ceiling tariff. Power for suo motu proceeding in case of delays in filing. Provisions of national tariff policy to be made mandatory for states to follow. I don't think this is going to happen. I don't think any state is going to agree that whatever the NTP decides will be mandatory. I don't think the political setup will allow that. Failure to comply with RPO would result in penalties. Renewable generation obligation to be followed by the coal lignite-based projects. No cross-subsidy surcharge for power from RE, renewable energy. National renewable energy policy to be formulated by the government. DDG has been defined in the bill. Spinning reserves, ancillary reserves to strengthen the security. This is an excellent thing. We do need to have this. Raise penalty bars for the conventional renewable generators. Intrastate trading margins to be fixed by the SERCs. So the state-owned distribution companies are deemed intrastate traders, will be buying and selling of power. And this is trading of power. So, but they'll have to be under a margin, mandatorily. So the state regulator fixes 5 paisa or 10 paisa, 20 paisa. I don't know how they're going to participate in Mr. Raut's power exchange because the price is market determined. And if there's margin is higher, then they have to return the money or something like that. In 15-minute time blocks, I forgot to mention. So development of markets including trading and forward contracts. Issues related to separation of content and carriage, cherry picking, fixing of interstate margins, blah, blah, blah. One can go on, but I will stop. And I would like to invite Suhas quickly to react and Mr. Maru. In the meantime, we hope that the minister will land up and then Dr. Dev.